Oh, or we can just get started. Thank you, Phil. So, welcome everybody. I'm Tony Sina. I'm a sales engineer here in the New York office of ValueBlue, and I'm really excited to host this panel today with three really lovely and talented folks. I'm going to go ahead and give you a brief intro of each. I'm going to try not to be extemporaneous because I don't want to discount their experience and the talent that they're bringing to the discussion today. So, without further ado, let me introduce first Gretchen Paulus. She is the Director of IT Strategy and Planning at Penn State University. With a background spanning retail operations, nonprofit leadership, public transit, and now higher education, she brings a highly customer-centered lens to IT. She's currently leading the development of Penn State's Enterprise Architecture Office, focusing on cross-functional collaboration, human-centered design, and strategic workforce planning that aligns with emerging technologies like AI. Gretchen, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm also joined by Lakshmanan Velayutham. I apologize. He is the Director of Enterprise Architecture at NationalGrid. He has over 17 years of experience in the EA space across nonprofit, finance, and research industries. Lakshman is deeply focused on delivering business outcomes through architecture, advocating for agile, just-in-time approaches, and helping organizations prepare for the accelerated impact of AI. He sees AI as a critical change agent in the enterprise. Excuse me, Lakshman, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
And then, of course, last but certainly not least, Marina Kuznetsov. Apologies for the pronunciation. She is the senior manager of EA at Ameren with over 20 years in software delivery and leadership. Her experience spans from library automation to biotech and now the utility sector. At Ameren, she has driven agile implementation and built out EA and solution architecture practices. Marina champions pragmatic design, agile-minded governance, and EA's role in balancing innovation with operational stability, especially in highly regulated industries. Marina, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. Happy to be here.
Excellent. And folks, if you do have any questions as we go along, feel free to post those in the chat. I will try my best to make sure that those are incorporated into our conversation. Otherwise, I have some guiding notes here, but really it's up to you where we take this, and it's up to our panelists, obviously. So let us dive right in. So I guess I'll throw this to the group. Maybe Gretchen, we can start with you. How have your non-traditional or technical backgrounds shaped your approach to enterprise architecture? So just going from the intros, right? I know that Gretchen and Marina, you guys come from very diverse backgrounds as far as like EA versus non-EA spaces. I know, Lakshman, you have pretty much the most seniority as far as like traditional EA, and I'm a baby in the space, obviously. But I'm just curious, like where the stuff that's happened to you in previous roles has kind of informed your current, EA trajectory.
Sure. So, my roles have been very customer focused. I came up, through sort of a customer centric pipeline starting in retail operations. And so when I'm looking at things in the EA space, I'm really trying to see, what the impact is to the end user, and what value that our solutions are going to bring to them. So not necessarily doing what's best for IT always, it's what's going to make the customer most happy.
Awesome. And Marina, I suppose same question to you, right? You came from a software development background primarily, if I remember correctly. So I'm just curious, like how kind of the work that you've done in the past is informing the current work that you're doing.
Well, it's kind of twofold because I have both delivery, just software delivery, and agile transformation experience. And as far as delivery goes, it does help me from the architecture point of view to emphasize with the delivery teams, because we know that architecture sometimes can appear as more governing and maybe even as an ivory tower, although I believe those days have gone because it's not possible to make a difference this way. So just understanding the point of view of delivery teams helps better tune our support for them. And agile transformation informs how we work in a fast-paced, agile or not environment, and that helps as well.
Right, Lakshman, I see you. I see you nodding in great agreement with Marina. I'm just curious. I know that. So I know that your background is very very rooted in EA, right? So the other the other two panelists and myself included, kind of new to the space, relatively speaking, right? So I'm just curious. I'm curious what your take is on this. Like, do you see, like, in your practice, I guess in your group, do you see a lot of diverse backgrounds? Do you see that benefiting you in the long run?
Yeah, I think as Marina said, things are changing, right? So 20 years ago, how the enterprise architecture used to be more like run like ivory tower and more like a gatekeeping. Now it is changing more into business outcomes driven enterprise architecture space, right? That's what we are seeing. And even though people come from different backgrounds, even core IT backgrounds, we are into the realization, what is EA adding value in terms of services? We call it EA services. So the services being like being a guiding, being partnering, being the trusted partner with our business stakeholders and building that relationship. There are still a lot of soft skills needed from the EA side that is still leveraged across the board, and then shifting that mindset from the control and governance to more like guiding and establishing the business outcomes. That's where I see this is moving.
No, it's interesting. It's an interesting point. So I guess this kind of takes us into kind of really the whole point of our discussion today, right? So, as things continue to evolve, I'm going to mention AI here because I think I'm required every hour to say that at least
Yeah.
once. But as that continues to evolve, as pretty much the entire enterprise service framework, as you put it, right, it continues to evolve. Like, I would imagine that there's going to be some skills that are going to fall by the wayside, right? So, like, as cars came onto the road, horses tend to be less used as a mode of transportation, right? So what's the horse in this then? So, like, what core skills are going to become critical, and what skills are going to fall by the wayside? Marina, maybe we can start with you if you have any thoughts on that.
As Lakshman already mentioned, the soft skills are becoming much more important. But I would also say that ability to see a broader perspective, ability to step back from even technical and span into the business domain. EA is starting to cross into business architecture, although it is sometimes, for some teams, it's a subset of EA, and sometimes it's an augment. But in my experience, it's becoming much more important to understand the business and to understand the strategy and connect the dots and help both sides speak the same language. And that's not usually the type of people that were attracted into architecture traditionally.
Right.
But that's changing very rapidly and even faster with the growth of AI influence.
No, it's a very good point, and it's interesting, that we've seen, like, I've had a lot of fun with a lot of the presentations that have happened today, and I've seen some really interesting diagrams, some really interesting architectural models, and I struggle sometimes because as great as those are, I'm of a particular mindset, right? You have to be able to translate this to the business. This is a common refrain that we see at ValueBlue, where it's, we have folks who's like, I don't know how to sell this to the business. It's like, that's kind of a core competency that we have to have, right? Actually, this kind of segues very nicely into Guralf's question here. He mentioned it to Gretchen, but we can open it up to, well, we'll start with Gretchen and then we can open it up to everybody. Like, the customer-centric perspective that you were talking about, Gretchen, do you apply that to internal users as well? Because it looks like Guralf is saying he sees two positions. One is to have such a perspective. The other is to focus on external and let the internal users struggle with tech debt. So I'm just curious, and this kind of touches on what we've been talking about already, but do you feel like you have that same kind of customer-centric perspective with internal users as well as the customer users.
Yeah, so that's yes, because they're our direct customer, right? And so essentially the end user is our indirect customer, but likely a customer of our direct customer. So it's all has a ripple effect. You know, we have to Marina's point, be able to see that larger picture, right? To have those conversations about how it will impact our direct customer, but then also how can we make their job easier, right? IT is a supporting function in an organization. And so, it's not our job to put roadblocks in the way. It's our job to help move them and help people get to yes. And so, I think about EA as how do we get to yes? And that is something that I used to do in the retail section, right? If someone came to me with a problem, it was, okay, how can we get to yes? And so I think, back to the original question, a critical skill is going to be negotiation, right? And conflict resolution and that sort of relationship building. As AI, see, I did the plug there, starts to automate some of the more rote pieces of EA, you're going to have more of that humanity come into the space. And so I think, looking at it through a customer lens, I don't see how that takes you down a bad path.
No, it's an interesting point, and that's something that we talk about too. Is the idea of with AI kind of the term that we throw around is it's going to commoditize operations work, right? So like a lot of those rote functions, like you're talking about, where do the employees of the organization lie at that point, right? They're going to be more focused on innovation and design because we need to create differentiators in the market. But then where does the enterprise architect fit into that? And one of the propositions that we've put out there is that the enterprise architect then becomes kind of the orchestrator of change as opposed to the agent of change. They're the ones that are responsible for kind of the principles and the kind of the framework of the organization. They have kind of that knowledge, that tome of information to kind of help guide the innovators at that point. Lakshman, I know that you and Marina are in the utility industry, so or the energy industry in general, and there's a reason why we have like kind of that phrase, this is what keep the lights on, this is what keep the lights off, because having the lights on is super important. So I would imagine conflict resolution, like to Gretchen's point, I would imagine conflict resolution is a huge part of kind of your role, and I would imagine that you foresee that as being very important to you as we move forward in this kind of climate.
Yeah, I think one other thing I see, not only in the utility but other industries as well. I think the skills, apart from the influencing and collaboration skills, understanding the business problems better, like Gretchen said. And one other thing, I would use the AI again. We need to be innovators as well. So one is if you understand more what we are trying to do from the business perspective, then you would apply the technology or the innovation to solve the business problem. For example, sustainability is one thing we are working on. So NationalGrid is a part of the sustainableIT.org. So there are initiatives there how we can reduce waste even in IT, right? So because one of the things is app rationalization that we do, but the other thing is choosing the cloud infrastructure and then enabling or optimizing the resources that we use in the cloud and how we can minimize the waste. I think that is all still part of the architecture, but that is helping the overall sustainability and clean energy goals that we are supporting for the business. That is one aspect of it. And then also overall the customer experience aspect, like OT IT systems that we have, and we need to respond to the emergencies. How we enable this, for example, we talk about the grids, right? The transformers that is out there, and monitoring them in real time using AI, and then able to alert and do the preventative maintenance, And that is all evolving as we speak. There are new technologies that are coming that can solve that problem. So we can prevent a grid failure before even that happens. We can detect it much in advance. So those are the things we are working on with our partners, and some of the startups are doing that. So what I'm saying is, from the enterprise architecture perspective, we need to look at those aspects holistically. From one is business process, one is the critical mission critical systems for us, the other one is sustainability. So the EA is adding value in all these pillars. That's how we are doing it.
No, that's interesting. It's hard. It's hard for me to visualize the idea of like a grid or a framework without just like the antiquated idea of like the large switches that people are going up and down with, like the silent film Metropolis, where he's just like he's just putting switches all over the place. So Marina, I'm curious, like just kind of bouncing off of that, because you guys are pretty much aligned as far as the industry is concerned. Like I know that energy companies, utility companies, they're modernizing, right? They're trying to keep things up to date with regard to sustainability, like you touched on, Lakshmanan, with regards to just making sure that you have a more resilient network. But at the same time, they have to maintain sort of stability, right? We can't have the lights go out in favor of those innovations. So how do you balance the kind of agility that your organization wants to see with kind of with your architectural discipline, right? Or just making sure that like I said, like the lights literally stay on.
You do it very carefully and slowly. Yep. And progress moves slower in the utility industry, and there is a reason, as you already mentioned. Any disruptions can cost real disruptions to the families, to the consumers of the power, and we take it very seriously. We're very careful, cautious. However, you have to move with the times. So that includes move to the cloud where we can. That includes incorporating some business intelligence, maybe not as much AI, although we have internal AI implementation that is just constrained to using our own data for now, but we're working on evaluating how far we can go and how quickly we can go outside that framework.
That's a very good point. Managing. So do you find, I know this is a bit of a digression, but I'm the moderator, so I can do whatever I want, right? I'm just curious, like with regard to the AI model that you're using, do you find, or does your organization find that there's an increase in hallucinations because of the kind of limited data set that it's working with? I'm just out of curiosity, compared to something like a ChatGPT that might have a more generalized.
Well, we took the public model and we just restricted. As we're adding our data, it doesn't go anywhere. And that's where the restrictions come. So we do have a full model that we're building on. It's working fine for our purposes. We find it limiting that we can't continue to expand, right? Because once we start adding our data, that limits your scope at that point.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate that.
We'll have to break out and do something different.
No, valid point. I appreciate the digression. So Gretchen, I'm going to throw this one to you. There's a question in the chat here from Jeff. Jeff, who was impressed with me turning into a Muppet. Jeff, you'd be amazed at how complicated the prompt was for ChatGPT. I gave it a picture of me and I said, make me a Muppet. So Jeff asks, in your experience, how have you seen business architecture drive the most impact when operating as part of an EA practice or as a standalone function? And then he's asking about, like, what were the key trade-offs or success factors in that model? Do you have anything to add, or like anything to kind of contribute to that one?
Yeah, so there's a lot of skill overlap in those spaces, right? And so it's very business architecture works best when they can sort of vocalize what the business requirements are in an IT way. So acting almost like a translating factor. And so, the question as a standalone function or, as part of an EA function, I think you build better trust when it's part of an EA function, because you're meeting regularly, you're having open discussions. Standalone sort of tends to create a silo in that space, and there's a little disconnect with the translation. I've certainly found that when a business architecture is in the room, that it's a better contextual conversation, and that really helps sort of shape solutions that are going to lead to success sooner than they would if you were trying to do that separately.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are two things that we don't talk about as much as we should, right? So the first one is business architecture, especially in the EA framework, and then the other one, and I know this is a little bit of a digression, but change management doesn't seem to be something that we talk about very often. So, like, yeah, even when ValueBlue kind of extols the virtues of solution design, we tend to forget that there's real people involved in actually making the solution work, right? So that's something that we try to integrate in the framework, but it's never perfect. Sorry, Lakshman, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. I think just to add there, the business, I think you brought up a good point, right? Sometimes the business architecture requires business process changes and re-engineering that need to be coordinated with change management. So one of the things I saw working is, so I had different ways, right? We had business architect embedded in the EA team, but the issue seems to be the number of resources we get and the ability to focus on all the business processes and all the business functions, roles, and making that was a little bit tedious for us. We couldn't handle that. I think the model recently where in ITC that worked is we had a business architect embedded in the functions. So, for example, finance function, they had their own business architect, and then they would look at the entire process end to end, and then they will work with change management, and then they will work with the enterprise architecture team. So that model seemed to have worked better from the impact perspective for us, because that's why they could spend more time into that vertical, that function, and then otherwise it is hiring would be an issue. If you bring the business architects into EA, then we will need more, like we will need that many number of resources. Hiring could be an issue as well.
That's a good point. So, Marina, I know that like you and I have talked about AI separately and just kind of, where it stands as kind of the game changer for the future. Regardless of whether we buy into that kind of commoditization of operations and, AI is going to take over particular jobs. What do you think it means for like an EA, like an enterprise architect, to be a change agent today? And are you guys taking any steps to kind of make that real within the organization?
We certainly are taking it seriously and learning. We have one of our architects is deeply involved in developing that on top of that model that we have in-house. We also have another architect who is getting much more familiar with it. We're a reasonably small team, so we're trying to divide and conquer. But we're involved in learning and guiding. We also just now stood up the AA governance process, which helps us. We talked about being cautious. We're finding that some upgrades to the SaaS software is bringing AI without us always knowing about it. So we're being very careful, exploring every change that is coming and reviewing what it may mean.
Right.
for our data and what vulnerabilities we're willing to take on, risking potentially, and what we cannot absolutely allow. And Lakshman talked about OT systems. That's absolutely out of reach for any kind of potential exploitation. So, but we're trying to champion that change instead of being victims of it. Obviously, it's always a better position. And trying to get ourselves into the level of skills where we can lead the organization.
Yeah, especially, I mean, as the rate of change accelerates as quickly as it has, right? So, we talk about Moore's law. I think NVIDIA and company have come up with the accelerated Moore's law now, where it's like every few months as opposed to every year or so. It's super important to get in the front of that, and it's just, you're jumping on a moving freight train. It's kind of difficult. Lakshman, I'm going to throw this one to you from John here. What are your thoughts in AI eventually going into the EA space, where orgs can do more with less resources, and therefore there will be smaller EA orgs? So, I guess John's concern is that there's a bit of a shrinking of EA as a result of AI kind of taking our jobs. What's your take on that?
I see it differently. It won't take our jobs. We will become more effective and deliver more, deliver more business outcomes. That's how I say it. I think one of the thing I can speak to that. I did this myself in IDC in prior org, where I championed the AI be that agent to solve the business problems that they were having operationally. These are all internal customers, and then working on that, solving through the problems, and then enabling more use cases, use cases in production within 6 months. So that kind of innovation and making the change really impact. They see the value. As you see the value coming out of EA through what we are delivering, it will, more work will be coming our way, means more we can deliver. I don't think they would the headcount will reduce or something, because we are applying AI as a productive tool, like you asked, right? A developer can use it for coding to generate code, but EA can use for looking at the capabilities. Like the APM is a good example. Actually, I'm looking at that as we speak. So we are doing the capability modeling, we are doing the app rationalization, we can apply AI, and you can create an output saying these are the duplicates, or these are the capabilities that are overlapping among these 5 applications, right? Those kind of things we could do. We are going to heavily. Uh, I think the rise of AI augmented architecture is here right now. The
Right.
agentic AI is there. Agents are going to be imploring into every space, every platform. So what happens is, as part of the solution architecture, you will see the AI agents becoming a component of the solution architecture. And then that means the enterprise architects would include that in the consideration as we do the strategic architectures.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm reminded of like kind of roles in the past where, I've as somebody who's worked in like back office operations for financial services companies. I mean, people can relate hopefully and know that there's a lot of manual work that goes into that, right? A
Yeah.
lot of like literal paper pushing, and you write a macro or you write something that it kind of accelerates a particular process. That process doesn't go away. It just goes from handling every single item like an exception to handling actual exceptions.
Right.
So I think, and this is my 2 cents, right? AI is not going to come for your job, but AI is going to come for the job of people who don't embrace AI. So, like, in other words, and I'm stealing a little bit from somebody that we're doing a webinar with next week, but that's his take in it, and I buy it wholeheartedly, just based on kind of like past experience with technologies, kind of creeping in and accelerating the work that we're doing. So there's a question here from Nick. Gretchen, if it's okay, I'll throw it to you. How do you approach solution design differently for business-centric versus tech-centric initiatives? And does it impact your EA resource alignment? So, Yeah, I guess. How do you at Penn State approach solution design to begin with, and then maybe we can kind of parse the business centric versus tech centric there.
Yeah, right now we're actually in an optimization exercise at Penn State, and so we're reimagining how we approach solution design.
Oh,
So
fascinating.
there's actually a work stream associated with that that has a couple of architects on that to sort of consult and weigh in on what is that going to look like. Because we're a distributed organization, there is sort of no centralized solution design, right? So we're a university that has a central IT function, but then there's 60 units with federated IT out there, and so some of those units are designing their own solutions for their own business needs. And so we're really talking about how do we get visibility into that, how do we standardize on the things that we can while still giving them the flexibility that they need to run their business. Because, the College of Ag is a lot different than the College of Liberal Arts, right? And so they have different customers, they have different needs. And so, tech centric things really come out of sort of the central IT, I would think. Those are a lot of your infrastructure projects related to sort of enterprise foundational capabilities, and the business ones are more discussed right with those end user customer stakeholders, not the indirect piece. And so when we resource those, we really try to find who we talk about our skill set as sort of a T. And so some folks have a deeper T than others, and so we'll try to put the deeper T folks in the technical spaces and keep the broad folks in those business centric spaces, and then pull other architects in as we need to.
60 confederated houses. This reminds me, there was a really excellent presentation this morning about siloed implementations and IT security risk, and meshing it with your enterprise architecture. You should check it out. It was really very interesting this morning. So there's quite a few. Well, there's a couple extra questions here. Oh, there's actually three now, so that I can say quite a few officially. But let me throw this out to the panel before we kind of dig into those. I know we have maybe about 10 minutes left. So one of the things that I think, this is my just kind of 2 cents in my vast 7 months of experience with this stuff. I think one of the aspects, one of the qualities that I think is going to have to carry over, regardless of how AI takes over the role, or regardless of what parts of it is taken over by AI, or whatever innovation comes up, I think storytelling is going to be extremely important for an enterprise architect. I think it's important today, and I think it's going to be important for the far gone future, because again, as the we talk about like a repository of your EA information as a human repository, right, for the business, and kind of the understanding both of it from a technical and business perspective. You have to be able to communicate this to your broader stakeholders. You have to be able to communicate the concepts, the solution design, everything that you're doing. You're going to have to communicate that in a way that your business is going to understand, right? So your CIO and your PMO, they're going to understand the same concept in two very vastly different ways. So I'm curious, and I'll throw this out to whoever is willing to kind of bite. I'm curious where you feel storytelling fits in with kind of the future EA, or future enterprise architect or solution architect.
We're kind of coming full circle, seems like. Started with softer skills, right, and business understanding and broader perspective, and that kind of brings us around to it, because storytelling is the only real way you can explain what you're trying to do and why, because people need the why.
Yeah.
You can no longer just throw guidance at people and expect them to follow. We have very intelligent group of people in the organization that they're all expecting us to respect the intelligence and explain ourselves. And that comes with knowing the business, understanding your audience, and tuning your message to the audience. And yes, design thinking, I saw that in the chat, is important skill when we're hiring. We'll look for that. We also look for just generally collaborative skills, because a loner in IT can no longer achieve much. And I'm absolutely convinced of that. And everything takes a team. And we're positioning our architects as part of the team that they support. So they often start with the design phase and stay in touch with the team and support them throughout the delivery process, even. As especially in agile delivery, design may change. You may discover something that you need to pivot. If you have an architect that's been with you from the beginning of that journey and can help, they can also, we have some architects who can help kind of sell it to the business, right? The changes, and explain why IT is taking longer, for example, in some cases, why we're looking at challenges and what we can do about them. And if you put it in understandable words and pictures, then you can get a much better outcome.
Yeah. And Gretchen, I know that you're, I know that you're in the process of building out your EA office. Like, how important is that to you right now? The idea of, well, I guess let me phrase it this way: what are you using right now to kind of sell folks on the idea of the EA office kind of being the go-to for a lot of the work that's happening in these kind of confederated offices?
Yeah, we do a lot of work on the back end, right, to identify skills, to identify current state, to identify where pockets of architecture are occurring. We don't put a lot of that stuff in front of people, right? We take all that data and all that information, and that informs a story that we're telling, right? The business doesn't care what my data is on the back end about, that I have maybe 15 pockets of architecture happening and I'm strong in this particular skill and weaker in this one. What they want to know is what the value EA is going to bring to their business process, to, how do they get IT services more efficiently, more effectively? How can they innovate in those spaces? And so that's what they care about. So we have to translate that data into a message that resonates with the business, because that's who we need the support from. We need our organization needs top-down support from our executives, and so the executives aren't speaking geek, if you will, and so it's a lot easier to tell that story, and then if someone wants to dig into it, have the data to back it up. But you also want them to get excited about it. I need those executives to be my champion. So if I tell them a story that's super heavy on data and just boring, if you will, they're less inclined to be a champion, or less inclined to, bring it up at a party that, EA's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Champions have to be won over. That's why they're champions, right?
Yeah.
Lakshman, so we got about 5 minutes left. Just shifting gears a little bit, maybe kind of turning the idea inside out, right? What role do you think EA can play in workforce planning and shaping future-ready teams? So we've talked a lot about what's going to be important for an EA to have in the future, but as an enterprise architect or as in kind of EA practice, what can we do to help plan the workforce, shape those future-ready teams?
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to consider with all the evolution in AI, there is going to be more federated approaches for the architecture, and you will see the federated teams with doing their own architecture. So the EA teams, I think, then apart from the storytelling, apart from the skills we talked about, I think they the future readiness means they need to think in terms of the technology and the innovations that is happening in the industry. They need to be on top of it, because nowadays business value creation will be quicker if you bring in the technology and the innovation to the table and have that discussion with our C-level executives. Okay, how that can help solve their business problems. I think that kind of mindset change on how we can bring that to the table. That is one thing I think the evolution or the future ready teams need to consider that aspect. It's not about just following TOGAF or ZACPEN framework. I think we are beyond that now. I would say we still need to have some process, but the thing is, we need to be agile, we need to be quick, we need to apply the agility need to be there, and the AI infusion need to be there in that architecture mindset need to be little bit changing in that direction. That's what, if I am hiring a EA, that's what I would look for, those kind of abilities to be part of the team. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So Marina, same question to you, and then Gretchen, I'll let you have the last word if that's okay.
Make everyone an architect. I think to some extent, instead of being afraid for a job, spread it. Be there with the technology roadmap, help people understand what's coming, prepare them for the future, so that you're still in the lead, and maybe it's a smaller team, but it's still influential and powerful team. So being a mentor and a trainer for the organization, and a trailblazer.
Yeah, no, deputize everybody, right? Teach everybody to fish, and then we'll just
Exactly.
catch the whole ocean. Gretchen, I promise you the last word. Go for it.
So, I mean, deputize was the word that I was thinking of, when Marina was saying that. But I also think EA has the ability to look at a roadmap for what the business needs and help advise HR on what skills you're going to need down the road, right? So if it's a particular technology that maybe you don't have that built up so much in your workforce, EA can say, look, you're going to need these sysadmins or these trainers or these types of people. So do a talent share, or instead of contracting out for that work because you've sort of waited until implementation and handoff from an implementation partner to say, oh shoot, how am I going to support this, right? So that's one way that EA can help. I think another way is, in EA, you're uniquely positioned to understand what AI can and cannot do. And so you can help departments in your organization design AI that works well with humans to help alleviate some of that AI is coming from my job, right? Because AI is not perfect. We were talking a little bit about, sort of, does it diminish in the space? Does it diminish, the participation of people? Does it replace people? And we had a saying in the transit sector that the last mile was probably the most important, right? So the bus will take you to where the bus stop is, but maybe you have another 2 miles to go or 1 mile to go to get to your destination. And so that's where EA is going to become important. And so we need people in the workforce who can understand those pieces and work with the AI. And so architects really have the ability to help craft AI solutions in a way that complements that sort of human element.
Very, very valid point. And I think we're at time, so we're going to leave it there. Folks, I hope you guys had as much fun as I had, because I really appreciate your time. Those of you in the chat, thank you very much for your questions. Hopefully we answered those. And if we didn't, you have everybody's contact info somewhere. So feel free to reach out, keep the conversation going. One of my favorite things about my job is being able to just have these conversations and be able to kind of like talk to the community, because especially in the US, it's especially difficult to find, capital E, capital A enterprise architects like Lakshmanan and like you guys. So really appreciate having an opportunity to talk to you guys about this stuff. So Gretchen, Marina, Lakshman, thank you guys so much. Everybody in the chat, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Take care.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Take care.
You too.